Sure, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
The boss.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm Hub Brown. I'm the, yes, and my voice is still changing apparently. I'm Hub Brown. I'm the Associate Dean for Research, Creativity, International Initiatives, and Diversity in the Newhouse School. Welcome to Big Data Day. We are here to talk about a lot of issues surrounding this phenomenon called big data. And there is much to discuss. We'll hopefully have a nice, lively back and forth with you about some issues. We'll talk about some of the experiences that people have had with managing gigantic data sets. But we want to get the evening started off in the right fashion. And to do that with her welcome is the Dean of the Newhouse School, Lorraine Branham.
Thank you, Hub. Welcome to our panelists. And thank you all for coming out tonight for Big Data Day, really now Big Data Night. As we at the Newhouse School, over the next few months, you will be hearing more and more conversations about big data and the importance of big data, and particularly data analytics. If you're not already hearing some of this in your classes, you will. It's been important for a while. I think the recent presidential election really focused a lot of attention on something that a lot of people have been in the trenches dealing with for a while, but it really has made it something that all of us are paying attention to. And certainly in our fields, in the field of advertising and public relations, even in journalism, this idea of using data analytics to figure out information, to better understand your audiences, to get new information about your audiences is something that has become increasingly important. And giving people the skills that they need to learn how to analyze this data, to package it, and then do things with it so that you can get what you need out of it is a real science. And we have not mastered that science, but they are certainly skills that we hope our students are going to learn and that you're going to be using in your careers as you go forward. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about how it was used in the election, how it's used in other applications, and I hope that it'll spark your interest, that you'll become tacticians who learn how to use this stuff, and that it'll be something that you will embrace and figure out a way to incorporate it in the work that you're already doing in the Newhouse School, so that big data is something that we're not afraid of, that we all embrace, and that we make use of as we go about our lives. So I hope that it's an interesting night for you. I think it'll be an interesting discussion because I think there was a lot of interest in what was behind the election and how they utilized data to get the turnout that they wanted. You'll hear a little bit about that, but going forward, I think you'll be hearing more in your classes and meeting other people who are going to teach you how to use big data in the course of what you do. So again, welcome. I'm glad that you all are interested in this. I know some of your arms had to be twisted to come out tonight, but that's okay. I think it'll be worth your while. So thank you very much, and thanks again to our panelists for being here tonight, and let's get the show on the road.
All right, thank you. And we do want to get the show on the road. You've heard this term, big data, quite a bit. It is a big buzzword. If you take a look at the mentions on the internet as far as big data is concerned, you're talking about a lot of conversation, especially over the past year. Forbes magazine reported that the use of the term big data has increased more than 1,200% on the internet in just this past year. We're talking about, when we talk about big data, we're talking about lots of bytes of information. And by byte, lots of bytes, I mean, we are dealing with massive quantities. We'll get to some definitions of what it all means in a bit, but suffice to say, we're talking about the entirety, really, of data generated every second, every day, by every one of us. IBM estimates that every day, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are generated all over the world. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. We're creating data so fast now that 90% of all the data in the world, according to IBM, has been created in only the last 2 years. 90% in only the last 2 years. So we are talking about an explosion, really, of data, of information, and of different ways to deal with it. And what we want to talk about here is what to do about all of this information that defines us by what we do, when, where, in what manner. These questions have huge implications for advertising, for public relations. They've had big implications for politics. And so we wanted to get into a conversation here about what has happened, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and what the future might be with regards to big data. And so to do that is this great panel. First, Ashley Bryant. Ashley Bryant is here. She wrestled with a lot of these issues in the past election cycle as the State Digital Director for Obama for America in the very crucial state of Ohio. And now she works in Chicago for a very familiar brand called Jim Beam. So I don't know if that's like a vacation for you or not, but handling data can be done in so many different ways. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. Grant Reeher is here as well. He is, of course, Professor of Political Science. He is the director of the Alan K. Campbell Institute, Public Affairs Institute in the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. Welcome, Grant. Also, Paul Morarescu is here. Paul is an assistant professor of data science in Syracuse University's School of Information Studies, the iSchool. Welcome, Paul. This is your panel. So, just to get started a little bit, let's give us some of your impressions about what being able to handle these large data sets means for what you're doing right now and what you did last year, and just some of your thoughts going in. How do we set this discussion up a little bit, actually? Start with you.
Oh, first, I'm really glad to be here. But essentially, I think the importance of where I am now, I think the transition, just to see that I'm with Jim Beam now, and there's a new role that I'm in as the social analytics and listening manager. And so now what you're seeing is that companies, brands, and politicians are recognizing where we are when it comes to needing to understand data and the integration. And I think that just those implications, just myself being a digital director for the campaign and being focused in Ohio and having someone sitting there and making sure that we're monitoring and we're analyzing to be able to make changes in real time based on data sets to be more informed about our consumer or our voter. Certainly shows that we've come a long way. We have a long way to go. But it's really showing that we're having a seat at the table. And not just as an add-on or as an addition, but to really be integrated into plans, whether it's political plans or marketing plans, from start to finish.
Very good. Grant, what are your thoughts about the impact politically? What's been the lesson for you over the past year?
Well, I guess I wouldn't frame it as a lesson. It's something that I've been wrestling with, and I got to just say I don't know what I think about this, and so I'm hoping that Ashley's going to help me sort it out here this evening. But it's the following concern, I guess, and there are a lot of concerns that get raised about the use of the internet and the kind of data that's available through it for our political life, for our social life. And there are a couple big ones that I don't think are problems. I'll just mention them. We can come back and talk about them later if we want. But I don't worry too much about this problem called the digital divide. And we can talk about that later. And I don't worry too much about the problem of declining social capital, both as they relate to how the internet and politics is affecting them. But the one that I do wrestle with is this. It's that when you look at the kinds of things that the Obama campaign was able to do, and certainly they weren't the only ones who have done this, and they weren't the only ones who were doing it at the time, but I think arguably they are the ones who have done it the best so far. There's a paradox, it strikes me. The internet seems to be integral to a certain kind of organizing and political participation that we would want to see, I think, when we first think about it. It's more horizontal. There's a joining of this data collection to volunteer behavior that seems to come from the bottom up, and again, has a lot of peer-to-peer aspects to it. But as I sit there and I think about it, I worry and I wonder whether I ought to be worrying. How manufactured is it? So on the one hand, you've got campaigns being able to use the information and connect that to the social networking aspects of the internet to generate some real political attention and interest that arguably wasn't there before. You're bringing new interest, new people into the system, and to facilitate people engaging in collective political action together when they might not have done so before. That's all good. And that seems like it should be good. And so, in addition to that, the activities that these folks are engaging in through the campaign, they're real. They're not pretend. You have real people knocking on real doors, talking to each other, phoning each other, emailing each other. These conversations are real, but I still am kind of haunted by the idea that there may be something manipulative about it, that they're ultimately doing it because you've got a bunch of smart people behind the Oz curtain pulling the levers in certain ways to making this happen. So it's real, but I wonder how authentic is it, and I wonder whether I ought to be wondering about that. So that's my concern that I guess I would start with as far as what I've been wrestling with.
I definitely want to get back to that a little bit, because that's going to be very, very interesting. But Paul, we don't have to convince you too much of the value of managing these huge data sets, do we?
That's right. I'm an assistant professor in the data science program at the high school, and we have a whole curriculum which is kind of focused on big data and data science. So that is actually one of the impacts that big data has today and has had for some years now. It's changing the curriculum in U.S. universities. Going back to the election, I think one of the catchphrases that I like is it was a money vote election, and whoever watched the movie Moneyball, it's about baseball, the way using big data changed the whole picture, and the way data kind of replaced full teams of people that were using their gut instinct and their experience and this human factor. So all that was replaced with using data and making mathematical decisions. We are going into the same direction. That's my view in politics. What the Obama campaign did this election is great, and the Romney campaign also did some good things. But in 2016 and next time in 2020, we will see more big data, and we will see more impact of big data. So I am actually kind of midway. I'm enthusiastic about it, but I'm also trying to be objective, and I'm trying to think about the implications of using, more math and more data into elections as opposed to the human factors. I have some difficult questions that maybe I will be able to ask here. Big data is also going to impact most aspects of our lives. I would say. It's not only politics, it's not only university classes and curriculum. The industry is going to be, every sector of the industry. The financial industry is already relying on so much data that we kind of lost count. For example, the high frequency trading is a phenomenon that's difficult even to kind of identify. Other industries as well, marketing, and basically I saw, for example, another number by IBM that 1/3 of business executives today, they make decisions on data that it's either missing or they don't trust the data. So we will see a lot of investment in data analytics in the next years, and we are talking big numbers here. Another great big data project, that's another showcase, because I see the Obama campaign as a great showcase for big data and data science, is the IBM Watson, on which I worked for a couple of years. And I think everybody knows about it, and most people are impressed by the results of having a computer system beating the Jeopardy historical champions and the best players on Jeopardy. So you can achieve amazing things using data in, I would say, many, many sectors of our economy and our lives.
Mm-hmm. A great many promises, a great many things that can be done in terms of marketing, in terms of a lot of things. Ashley, let me come back to you here for a second. There are a number of activities that your people engaged in Ohio that got you people voluntarily to come to you as data sets themselves, right? And then that allowed you to do a number of different things. Can you maybe describe maybe an activity or transaction that took place there where really people come to you with information and then you're able to use that later on?
Sure. I think there's a couple things. Our events, for example, which is more of a offline example, but our events, I decided that, and our colleagues decided that people are voluntarily coming to see the president, right? They're coming to see the vice president and whomever that we have in town, and they have to get a ticket. So we were making sure that the forms that they were filling out on these tickets included the information that we felt were important for us to understand who are the folks that are coming through the doors to see the president. Are they Stark supporters? What groups are they identifying with? So we're making sure that these forms have name, email address. Are you a student? What university are you attending? Are you a veteran, a woman? So that is an example of where it's a little lower barrier to grant, because it's not, people aren't really worried about giving their information when they're going to see the president. But separately, our website is another good example, which when you want to be affiliated with a particular group. So for instance, when we launched Catholics for Obama, and folks are coming on, they want to be updated, they want to stay in the know of when the Catholic for Obama groups are meetings and things like that. And so that's another form where they're voluntarily giving us information. They're sharing what accomplishments resonate best with them, what concerns they may have depending on what fields that we've added. But those are definitely times where people are voluntarily coming into the fold and readily giving their information that we can obviously use and really study to figure out who are the folks that are coming to us.
This sort of brings me back a little bit to what you were talking about as far as this notion of the data being manipulated or people being manipulated. Now, what you're saying is that these folks are coming to you voluntarily and they're giving information voluntarily. But I can hear those people who are concerned about issues of privacy, concerned about some of those issues that are out there, kind of waving the flag a little bit and saying, well, yeah, this is a transaction. Do they know everything that these people, do they know everything that they're getting into when they engage in that transaction? I know it's kind of rhetorical, but is that something that we should be concerned about as we go forward?
Well, here's the thing, it's that, and it's the multiplicity of the different, and that's sort of the concept behind
Right.
big data, is I understand it's the multiplicity of ways of gathering this information and then joining it all up and having this pretty complicated and finely grained picture of the folks that you're trying to reach and how you might best try to reach them. So it's the stuff that you're talking about on the one hand, but it's also buying the cookies. You know, it's doing the stuff that Amazon does, that everybody else does. And I've gotten great recommendations that way that come to me back through the fact that someone bought my activity, at least bought the ability to look at it. So, you know, again, I'm torn by it, but I think the concern is when you take that, you join it to that, you join to that, and then you start micro-targeting, you start playing with things, and you get me to do something. And again, it's a good thing I'm doing. I'm going door to door is a good thing. I mean, I believe in citizenship, so it's a good thing. But then I wonder, well, how did all this? What's driving it? Let's start.
Yeah, Paul, you got to talk about that.
Are we talking about the voters, how much they know? Yes, there are concerns related to privacy, for example. And one information that I found in the media is that the Obama campaign kind of guessed the identities of all the 70 million voters who voted for Obama in 2008. They took precinct data and they computed like a likelihood of every individual who has voted for Obama in 2008. So that's kind of the vote is supposed to be secret, but you can already guess it. Another thing that maybe will give people...
No, wait. It's supposed to be a secret ballot, and you're telling me that we can drill down far enough that we know who voted when.
I read that, yes. I can send you the link.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I think they'd love to see that too. Okay, go ahead.
Another thing that I read is that they actually had contracts with companies like Rent-A-Wreck, and they provided cable habits, like TV cable watching habits of people. For example, the Obama campaign provided a list of persuadable voters. They cared about persuadable voters. And that company checked the TV cable bills information, and they provide information from your DVR and your tuner records, like what you are watching. And then what that information was used, the way it was used is, they had a program, I think it was called Optimizer, and they kind of divided the 24-hour day into 96 segments, 15-minute segments. So you have 60 channels and you have 15-minute segments, and they computed, in what segment and in what channel they would get the most persuadable voters per dollar. Okay, so that they know where to place the ads, and that's why, for example, they had this. They made this kind of very difficult to understand decisions. They advertised that, in program, unconventional programming like Sons of Anarchy and other names. And for example, the Romney campaign people, they were saying that they tried to reverse engineering those decisions, and they kind of they failed. They say we don't understand this. We don't understand. We know they have algorithms to make those decisions. It's apparent that, but we don't understand how they work. So anyway, they went into a lot of details, and they combined a lot of data from fundraisers, from polls, from previous elections, voter registrations, public data, consumer information, credit information. They combined a lot of information, and I don't think that too many people know how much information, how much data went there, and what's going to happen with that data. In the future, is it going to be used in future elections? Is it going to be sold to other parties? What's going to happen with that?
Yeah, and we're going to get to some of those issues as well. What's the value of that information? Those sorts of things. But you did talk about some interesting decisions that left different sides scratching their head. I remember hearing about one of them in the aftermath of the election, in that there were a lot of Obama campaign commercials in Big Ten athletics. On the Big Ten network, when you think about where the Big Ten network is, one of the big places is in Ohio. And you think about the demographic of people who are watching Big Ten football in September, and it then begins to come back to, well, you know, they did a lot better with working class white males in some of these states, and maybe part of that was some of that targeting. Actually, the targeting that can take place with the benefit of big data, we were talking about a little bit earlier, probably saved the campaign some money and probably brought up one of the sharper contrasts between the Obama campaign and, say, the Romney campaign in Ohio.
Absolutely. I think that targeting is done right, and it allows you to apply your resources more efficiently. So, and I gave this example before, but for myself, as I am the digital director for Barack Obama in Ohio, and I received 4 different Romney mailings. And, and so you have to stop at a point and pause and go, at what point were they going to realize that I am absolutely no way, shape, or form going to vote? I'm not persuadable to vote for Romney. And so I think that's a huge difference where they're, you know, while they may have had a lot of money, but if it's not applied correctly, it's a waste of dollars. You're losing resources. And so I absolutely think that we were advantageous in really applying the time into figuring out these data sets and understanding targeting and really applying, whether it's the Big Ten network or whether it's, you know, advertising for the right show. But done right, it allowed us to free up resources in order to have more bodies on the ground, to be knocking doors and doing all of these things. So targeting is very important, and being able to understand and analyze the information that you're collecting is critical when it comes to a resource or just being, you know, from a productivity standpoint.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because I want to connect that to something that you said earlier today, which I think was a very important point, that, you know, content is king.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have something to say, right? I mean, you can't, at the end of the day, as finely grained as this information can get, it's not that, you know, you could provide Ron Paul all of this stuff, and he's still going to get the percentage he's going to get. So there's a limit.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get a tweet from a Ron Paul supporter now.
I'm checking you guys out over here.
But the ultimate content, of course, is the candidate. So that is, you've got to have a candidate that you can get behind. But I'm wondering though, do you think though there's not a temptation or some kind of danger that if you're able to figure this stuff out, I mean, if you're able to say, all right, at 11 o'clock, these voters are going to be potential voters, are going to be doing this on these channels, this place, and this is where we have to frame this kind of ad, that the attraction of that is going to push out, relative to the amount of time that would have been spent before, attention to what the basic message is, attention to what the basic policy point is that these campaigns are supposed to be about, that technique, in a sense, will drive out and become more of the king than the substance of the content. Did you ever encounter anything that made you worry about that?
I would say that I would disagree in a sense, because I still believe that the message was there. It was consistent. Whether we're tailoring the message of okay, now we understand that this segment of persuadable voters are watching this show at this time. But it doesn't necessarily change the president. It doesn't change who he is. It doesn't change what his stance is. It's just we're going to put him in front of that person at the right time. So I don't think that the objective changes. I don't think from a policy standpoint it changes. It just allows us to get ourselves or increase our visibility with the right people at the right time. If that, okay.
I agree
You
with
can
that.
understand though how that would be a danger. You could give rise to the candidacy of the cipher, the person who just is whoever he is to whatever population they could be. And is that something, Paul, that is possible or a danger with something like this? That we're going to so completely target, we're going to so completely micro-target to populations that you will have a group of people who all support this in particular individual for any number of different reasons that have nothing to do with each other.
Just ask Bill Clinton.
Yes. But I would like to add that even the message that was sent to groups of persuadable voters, even the message was selected using big data. For example, they conducted random trials, and they sent sequences of emails, and every sequence, like every batch of emails, they have a different sender and a different subject line and a different message. And then they surveyed the people before getting the emails, and then they surveyed the people after getting the emails. So this kind of before and after experiment allowed them to select the attributes of the people who are persuadable and how exactly to persuade everybody. So they actually, again, tweaked the message itself using data. And they used the same technique for Obama healthcare, for Obamacare. They discovered that various segments of the population, they care about various parts of the legislation. So, but how do you discover that? You experiment, you conduct these kind of random trials. So they customize even the message. And yes, I was actually thinking about your question, if I understand it correctly. Maybe in the future, maybe 8 years from now, we can use big data to select the best candidate or the best team, just the way they did in Moneyball, to select the best, baseball team.
Yeah.
And it kind of went against the common wisdom of the people, the experience of the people who were doing that for 50 years. Actually, that's like the motto of the movie: you can play the game for 50 years and still don't know it. So maybe in the future, they will be able to not only match the message to the voters, but maybe they will also be able to directly use big data to match the message to the candidates. And then you will have a team of candidates selected more or less mathematically. It's kind of interesting to think about.
And maybe frightening. I'm going to turn to the audience and ask you now to get prepared to ask questions, because we will have a microphone going through the crowd. We also, in case you haven't noticed, I have a little iPad over here. Thanks, Dean Branham. Some of the questions may come this way as well. If you're tweeting hashtag Big Data Day, and you might have a question or two that comes through that you're thinking of, go ahead and send it that way, and either one of our fellows of Navigating the Media will catch that and ask me that question, or I will actually find it here myself and ask it. So, not guaranteeing I'll see every single one of them, but I'm going to try. All right. So, get some questions going, and we'll get started as far as that's concerned. Let's talk a little bit about other lessons that we can potentially learn. Now, Ashley, you've moved from politics into marketing into this building of the brand for bourbon. And in your present position, talk to me about the parallels between that and a political campaign. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
There's quite parallels us to drinking. Across the board, but responsibly.
Please, Joe.
But, it's vice versa, because, coming from marketing and moving in, I thought it was going to be just a huge transition when it comes to a strategy creation standpoint. I mean, obviously it's a transition coming from a 9-to-5 job to a 24/7, 365. But from a marketing standpoint, I thought it was going to be much, 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 much different. But for myself, I really was able to look at it as almost a flash sale, right? You have this brand, which is the president, and what is this killer marketing strategy that I'm going to run, and I was on the ground for a year, that I'm going to run for a year to get everybody in the door on this one day. For Ohio, it's a little bit different because we're an early voting state, but essentially it's how do we get them to buy on this one day. But now I see that what stays the same and what's consistent, which is really what we're talking about, is just really understanding the demographic we're trying to reach. Really applying the time to understand consumer behaviors, but how people change. And it's funny because you only get to the risky, the scary, the creepy in the political standpoint. because brands have been doing this for years. They have the Nielsen studies, they're knowing your shopper behaviors. These are all the same things that retailers have been doing for quite some time, especially when it comes to targeting within the television form. But I'm just seeing that it's much more, or seemingly much more intrusive, because politics are so personal, right? It's something where you feel like, well, this is my decision. Everybody, you know, I'm not going to walk around saying I'm a Democrat or a Republican. So it's a little more watched. You notice it more when they're learning your behaviors. But it's very similar from a marketing standpoint between a political candidate, which is it's kind of bad because I shouldn't say we market the president as the same I would market shampoo. But the basic fundamentals of understanding how do you message them, how do you talk to them, what resonates with this particular consumer is very consistent across the board.
Well, you know, you mentioned that last comment, and it reminded me of a quote from John F. Kennedy's father when he was running for president, and he said, "We will sell Jack like soap flakes." So there you go. And that's what they did, and it worked. But there is one distinction. I mean, the Moneyball analogy gets me thinking of this too, and the Jim Beam gets me thinking about this too. Is that the difference? That politics is different than those things in a very important way. And I guess I'll just throw this out there, but I'll betray my being a political scientist. I think politics is more important. And what makes it more important is that there's the question of whether the A's win the World Series as opposed to the Orioles is just not a moral question. I mean, you know, I suppose a fan might tell you otherwise, but it's just really not. And the question of whether I choose Maker's Mark or Jim Beam or whatever, Jack Daniels, you know, politics is about allocating values, not allocating consumption choices, even though in a sense we consume the candidate. And so that's the part that keeps me up at night about this, is that that's a different kind of question. And on the one hand, that's why I'm just, you know, looking for you to reassure me that the message of the president...
I'm not sure if you're going to get there.
The message, well, you're doing it somewhere. The message of the president is the core thing, and it's just a matter of putting that message out in front of that person in a more efficient, effective way. So, you know, but I just think being able to get this little piece of information and connect it to that piece of next, the seduction of that kind of power scares me a little bit.
But just... if I may, and I probably should not say this, but is it really as moral as it should be and as it used to be? Because I feel like, you know, we're obviously amongst very educated and intelligent folks, and we know that we live in a nation that is very diverse, and our average voter you know, falls within a certain demographic. But what comes to mind for me is that sometimes it is just the very basic. Sometimes it is just, I keep saying this, he was president before, you know, it's just this one thing that I'm a little confused about. Because a lot of times you do have to, and I don't want to, for lack of a better term, dumb down the message. But as we can have a very higher level conversation, whether it's issues or data or things like that, but from a campaign standpoint, it's about talking to that average neighbor and talking to them about, you know, what matters to them and figuring out, well, how can I help you relate to the president? It's not necessarily the really strong, valued conversations that we really should have and should be thinking about when you're talking about the president of the United States and who's going to run the free world. But when it comes to decision making, the things that blew me the most, which it could just be me, but when the folks that actually wait for the debate as if that's going to make the decision. And it's like, really just this hour of time is really going to tell you all you need to know? No way. There's no way. But there are different sets of people that only need the 30, 45 minutes and then they've made their decision. So I think it's different tiers at some point. You're right in a sense of, yes, this is very moral and it's not, it's not choosing makers between a Jack Daniels. You're absolutely right. But in some sense, it is, positioning this person who I stand behind and I believe is the right person, but positioning him in a way that I feel like it's going to resonate with these different sets of folks, that it's not always going to be that high level conversation. But
Interesting.
But still,
Go ahead.
in a situation where you have a high-level conversation with some people, like, there's a question for you. You are the next candidate for presidency in 2016, okay? And you have your beliefs.
Hiring her.
Yes. And you have your beliefs, I mean, you believe in some things, some issues, and you have your convictions, and you would like to tell to this constituency some message. And your mathematical model is going to indicate that you should tell the other message because that one is going to persuade more people. So what you going to do?
I think that's well stated, that's the problem. And I think the problem is that the more I'm going to do what you think I'm going to do there, imposing that, it changes the nature of this process in terms of the relationship between the candidate and the voter and the entire process. I mean, let me give an example of, this is a very dramatic example, intentionally provocative here, but I'm going to go way back in time in terms of campaign history. This is sort of the dinosaurs, but 1988, there was a very notorious political ad that got aired for, I think, half a day and then got pulled by the Bush campaign against Michael Dukakis, this Willie Horton ad. How many people have ever heard that if I say what? So 10%. So, but it got picked up by the media, so message delivered. Okay, we can all evaluate that. We can sit there, we can see that, we can say, we can think about what did the campaign just try to do to my thinking? How is it trying to move me? What is it trying to appeal to? With this stuff, maybe nobody sees that. We never talk about it. It goes under the radar because you've targeted it in a micro way at the right time, and maybe someone will. It requires the data police to, bring this out and show us what kind of messages are being shown. And we've got, but it just there's a complicated.
But I got to press you on that though, because really, in this day and age where everyone's talking about all kinds of things and we're tweeting things across the universe, a micro target is really Horton ad to a small population of people. Isn't it going to get uncovered? And then what does that then do? What does the blowback of that then do to a population of persuadable voters out there? And I mean, are there checks and balances? That's the thing. Yeah. You kind of wonder that. I've got a question here, and there are questions are coming, so I'm going to start to ask a few of them and kind of sprinkle them in to the conversation here. But we'll start with you, Paul, on this one. For students who are interested in digital strategy and data analytics, what skills and tools are the most important to know in your opinion?
Okay, we have a couple of new jobs on the job market. They are not really newer than other jobs. For data scientist and data engineer, for one thing. And what you need to know to be a data scientist or a data engineer, you need to know statistics, you need to know some data mining, which is like, it follows statistics, but you go deeper into looking for patterns into some parts of the data and classifying the data. So statistics, data mining, computer science, you need to know how to program computers. One language that's getting a lot of coverage today, and it's R, for example, the R language. So statistics, some computer science, you need to be a good communicator as compared to the average computer scientist, because you will be communicating your results to a wider audience than myself, in the sense that you will, a data scientist is not anymore a guy who sits in his cubicle and just programs the computer, and he only communicates with the immediate colleagues in his team and the manager. You need to be able to communicate directly to the top management of your company, and in this case to politicians and to voters and to other people. So you need better communication skills, computer science skills, statistics skills, and if you go into business, economics, politics, you need to know something about, for example, behavior economics. You need to know maybe some social psychology. So you need to be a kind of field expert so that you know what kind of data you want to put in your big data models so that you get the best results. Okay. So it's a combination of skills, and currently universities and colleges in this country, they are still working on defining the best combination of courses and programs for data science. We have one in the high school currently.
We're going to have some questions now, I think, from the crowd, and I think the dean has a question as well. We want to get some microphones around if we could. So.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on that question because my students aren't going to be data scientists, and so. But for someone who needs to have enough understanding of that field in order to do the work that they need to do in advertising or in public relations or in journalism, what courses might be helpful to them?
Do you hear that in the back up there? Question is, what courses might be helpful for those who are in the communications professions who may want to move along the direction of getting more out of data science?
I mean, actually,
Well, I would say, my background is communications, and I do think, and not to put myself on the stage, but I mirror what you're saying, because I think that the ability to present is becoming more and more important, even in the political sense, but then also from a corporation standpoint. So, you guys will probably have that understanding because that's your background. I do think that it's important to also really immerse yourself from just an overall business standpoint, and I believe that you touched on that too, because from a measurement, I don't think you have to be as getting into the intricacies of actually being a data scientist or an engineer, but to at least have that base understanding of the importance of being able to measure and analyze whether your marketing campaigns or strategies, the success and the failures. And a lot of that will come from some of your business courses and things like that. I actually, and this is not to say model me, but I actually was not able to take any of the data set classes, and a lot of it, or some of it, will be on the job learning a little bit. So I actually would kind of go a step further and even saying whether if you have opportunities, whether you're co-oping or interning and things like that, to make sure that you're giving yourself a broader sense. Where you may be studying PR or you may be studying communications, but I would stretch it further to have more of an integrated understanding of different departments and different areas within the companies that you're looking for. It's a little helpful. You might can add for someone. No, I cannot add.
We have microphones up there. We got a couple of questions here, so we want to get to some questions in the crowd, and I'll follow up as well. So. Aileen.
I left my phone in my office, so I have to ask an analog question. Getting back to if you target everything, if you do micro-targeting of messaging, what does that mean for partisanship? This country is already so partisan, and if everybody's getting a different version of the message, how do we ever come to any consensus on anything?
I'd like to definitely clarify from a campaign perspective, because when I think micro-targeting of messaging, it's not necessarily changing the message. It's more so, if I'm just aware that this is a persuadable voter, and I am aware that this particular demographic or segmentation of voters that we have are asking the questions about healthcare, then I'm going to send them the healthcare message. I'm not saying that I'm going to send the left side of the room, I might have did that wrong, but I'm not saying I'm going to send the left side of the room a different message about healthcare. It's just putting the message in front of the right people. So I want to make sure that I'm being very clear on that. At any point did we ever change the way, or excuse me, not the way, but change the message or change how we gave our voters the understanding of where the president stood on these particular issues. It was more so, I'm not going to inundate someone who, from data, I know that they understand this issue. And I don't want to continue delivering the same message to folks that may have already gotten it. So that's what I mean from a targeting. It's not to change the message, because I do think that that's scary. If we're going to say one thing for this group but say another to someone else, I think that's absolutely scary, and it's not something that I ever saw for our execution for campaign strategy.
Actually, let me ask you a quick little follow-up to that. As you went through as the campaign wore on last year, and you began to look at where your persuadable voters are and various kinds of messages, was there one major thing that surprised you based on the data that you were gathering about the electorate as it was developing over the year? Something that micro-targeting showed you?
You know, I would actually say, and this might not be surprising to most of you, but I would say that I was starkly surprised that we were not, there was a time where we were not being effective with women in Ohio. And this was definitely times where, as you know, one of the big themes were attack on women's rights, especially when it came to the healthcare issue. And so I thought that we were doing such a wonderful job of reaching out to folks that we felt were persuadable and targeting, and it really just was not changing the needle. No matter how far right Romney went, or for some opinions, how far left we may have gone, it never really changed the needle. And in a sense, I'm glad you asked the question, because you know, Paul is estimating that at some point we're going to be able to basically guess everything. We're going to know we have women, they're going to feel this way. And so, but I'm
you have your rebuttal in a second.
But it's those things where I just felt, even from a numbers perspective, or just at some sense, in some logic, that we had to have moved the needle at least somewhere, because in some instances I felt like we were being sent back a little bit when it came to the opposition side, when it came to women. But that was a very good time, a good pause to go, wow, you know, we're sticking to the right message, to the president's message, but it's just not changing. And we really had to take a pause and figure out what is it that is just not resonating with Ohio women.
So what then did you do based on that information?
What we did do a lot was offline, really we started having nonpartisan roundtables, working with some other groups in the Democratic Party, but really trying to organize women in a sense to really have truthful and honest conversations. And really kind of taking out the, okay, we want your vote, but really trying to understand, you know, here we are in Ohio, and nationally, it kind of felt like he was winning women. I think from hindsight, or what people tell me, because I wasn't watching the news, but, you know, nationally, it felt like, wow, man, you know, the whole binders full of women thing with Romney, I mean, it just seemed like they've got it. But in Ohio, that wasn't the sense. So I think offline, we really put a lot of manpower into engaging women, bringing roundtables, just to get a deeper understanding. And a key insight from that was that, which is I think it was a steady drumbeat, sometimes it's not just one issue, right? A good comparison is with the LGBT community. A lot of people would think, well, you're going to get every LGBT vote. But there's more that matter to people who identify in the LGBT community than just marriage, right? They care about the economy and jobs and all of these things. You know, they're regular, you know, it's not like they're different, they're regular people. So I think it was to really understand, like, wow, you're right. This is one issue, but women still care about other things. There are other things that we still need to talk to them about than just focusing on this one issue that we thought was just going to change the game.
I think that's interesting, and it almost is hopeful to me, because our politics has sort of been about these groups and these identities. If you're an African American, you're concerned about urban issues, and you're concerned about, you know, things like drugs and crime and employment and poverty, but you might not be as concerned about the environment. Well, that's not true. You know, just because I'm black doesn't mean I don't have a position about fracking or something along those lines. And it seems to me that that's what you're talking about. Is you're talking about peeling back the onion and finding out that these labels mean less than we thought they did going in. So I think that's very interesting. Another question right here, Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I was an organizer for the campaign in 2008, and I'm also an IT manager. And so my question comes from both of these perspectives at once. I heard, and first of all, thank you so much for what you did in Ohio, because we obviously couldn't do it here, so definitely appreciate it. But my question has to do with, you mentioned talking about people as consumers, and I thought one of the most powerful things that the Obama campaign did with data had to do with treating their supporters not as consumers, but as participants and partners. And I thought this was incredibly powerful, and I thought this is what big data looks like when it's run by a community organizer. And to my mind, that's what the Obama campaign did that was different than everyone else. And I was wondering if you could comment on that, because I think empowering volunteers to feel like they owned a piece of the campaign, and I don't even think that was BS. I think a lot of times people say things like that and they want you to think it, but it was real for me, and I think it was real for a lot of people in this area and elsewhere. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Absolutely, and I touched on this earlier, but you know, our campaign mantra was respect, empower, and include. And every single piece of my strategy, there was the respect, empower, and include. And we worked from the bottom up. Our volunteers were our bread and butter. They were the most important piece of our campaign, moving up through our field team. I mean, that is what, and you're absolutely right, our neighborhood team model and really building these lasting groups within communities that are going to be there way after the Obama campaign to impact politics locally. But we absolutely, from my digital strategy, it was to empower our communities, whether it was online or offline, with the right message that they needed to engage their networks. And we gave them all of the resources that they needed to be a part of the movement and to feel like they were the movement, because they were. We celebrated our successes with them, especially in Ohio with voter suppression and things like that. We knew that we pressured the Secretary of State through our volunteers and through the participants of the campaign. And so we continued to ask them for their help, because they were the people moving the needle, because they are the people. It sounds so cliche, but we never lost sight of that. And it is very important to the campaign to make sure that we're continuing that, and that is the exact foundation of everything that we're doing. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Thank you for your work in 08.
Can I ask a follow-up to that
Sure.
question? So what would you say drove that? I mean, I think that's a really important question and a really important point. So what drove that? Is it ultimately the candidate that drove that commitment?
Absolutely, and I, just as a caveat, I was not on the campaign in 2008, but you know, from everything that I learned with working with senior leadership, was that he still was hands-on in 2012, but he really wanted to build something that was not just to get him into office. He wanted to set a structure in place that would be a lasting effect. And the neighborhood team model is the foundation of that. And I'm using neighborhood team, but the term is exactly what it is. We covered the state in a sense of not just city or county, but down to the neighborhoods of groups of volunteers. And so I do personally feel like that was started by the president himself and ingrained into the campaign structure and leadership to continue to have that same rhythm into the strategy creation of 2012.
Very good. Other questions here? I see a hand or two coming up. There's one right there.
Hey, how you doing? This kind of follows up on Dean Branham's
I
question.
can't even see you. Where are you? Hey, stand up.
There we go. Oh, I got to say that.
Sorry.
Okay, so this kind of follows up on Dean Branham's question. I'm not technologically advanced by any means. I can barely figure out my laptop. But how do we as students, what resources do you suggest? Because you can't, I'm not going to be able to take a class and do anything with data. I really won't be able to do it. I can't take a one semester class and learn to manipulate data to make it a professional level. So is there something you suggest, whether it's an online resource or something that students can use to manipulate or at least get their feet wet? Because there's really no starting point right now. There's Code Academy if you want to get technological in that sense, but there's really nothing for data. Is there anything that you guys suggest?
Well, you want to take that on? I think that, again, one of the things, he doesn't want to take that on. One of the things that I think
I'm afraid
that's
there is
interesting here
no
is that
magic bullet.
there's no magic bullet. So some of these things we do have to get from that type of coursework, but also there's ways to be informed about what data sets and what working with large data sets actually can do for an organization.
I mean, I think, first of all, I feel your pain, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't just all of a sudden take 3 or 4 different courses at all of these different things. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure if there's the one magic course that's really going to give you everything. But for a free resource standpoint, I think whether you're using from the Hootsuites of the world, which is a Twitter tool that you can use, there's TweetStats. I mean, there's tons of things that you can kind of incorporate into your own personal use of social media. Because that's even something that I use just to stay relevant. There's a million startups every day that are trying to give brands and political campaigns a way to judge influence, measure any type of stats, especially for new platforms. And they usually release them as betas, and they're usually free. So I would definitely take some time to look into some of those things, and just with your own Twitter handle, with your Facebook page, I would just, sometimes you kind of have to step outside the box to really find the resources that you need in the little time that you do have in between classes and things like that. But there are free resources that you can try to at least get a sense of the analytics and look at what metrics are actually important.
Very good. Thank you. A couple of other questions coming over the line here. How does access to data affect what we see? Isn't data sometimes skewed by who actually has access to it? Paul, you want to take that?
Yes, it is. For one thing, again, data is, let's say, is a very valuable resource, and most companies, most owners, they kind of guard it. You don't have access to it unless you pay for it in one way or another. So, for example, I haven't seen an overall impact measure of the whole big data business in the Obama campaign, and I'm not sure we will see that. And one reason for that is it's difficult to maybe publish or communicate that unless you show kind of most of the types of data that you use. And I would say we will not see that. Probably that will remain, part of that will remain, confidential. So it's difficult to draw, again, even for this particular case that we talk about now, okay, this evening, okay, what is the overall impact of big data in the Obama campaign, in the sense that if we took big data off the table for Obama and for Romney, would we have a different president today? Or would we have a different, maybe, margin between them? I haven't seen that kind of answer. so far. So even for this particular case, which is maybe not, it's not in the business world, it's in politics, and you would expect to have more openness and to see more of the results. I didn't see that, but maybe other people know that.
You want to take that on, Ashley?
I think you can answer that question.
No, I wasn't.
You're gonna go someplace.
No, but I was gonna say, I think you're right in a sense of what we would have to reveal. That is going to prevent, a lot of that from being, brought out to say, this is how this works and things like that. So I was just gonna say, I agree that it's probably something that, won't be tied up.
In terms of the information, or in terms of the data, all those raw resources that were gathered, who owns the Obama campaign now?
Who
owns that? Who owns all that material? And is it ever going to be used again, and how?
In other words, could Hillary Clinton buy it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, could Hillary buy it? Could somebody else buy it? Could it be used in a different way now? Could it be repurposed for a campaign, say, about, I don't know, gun control or something like that?
So the campaign was two parts. It was Obama for America and then Organizing for America. Organizing for America were the states, because usually the states were funded by the local Democratic parties. Obama for America were headquartered employees, and then we also had 2 or 3 headquartered employees within states. So I was considered a headquartered employee. So technically I worked for Obama for America, but most of my colleagues worked for Organizing for America. As you can tell, all of these are the abbreviation OFA. So the new OFA 4.0, as we call it, has now moved into Organizing for Action. And Organizing for Action is a nonpartisan nonprofit that is essentially an advocacy group that you probably will see issues such as gun control being worked through with Organizing for Action and things like that. From a sense of if the 2016 candidate runs, can they come and buy all of this information? No. But what we can do and what we have done is compile our legacy documents where I was able to contribute to and most of, any of the senior staffers were helping writing the document. But what we compile is what worked, what didn't work, what would we have changed, and what are our recommendations for that candidate in 2016. And that's handed over to the DNC. So from an information buying standpoint, that's not there, but the knowledge is there. The knowledge is there. The needs of the world are still there when 2016 comes around, and we spent a lot of time of putting all the things that are in our head onto paper as the best way that we could to empower the 2016 group to hopefully be just as successful.
And how about the mega file?
I'm sorry?
The mega file. The actual data, what's going on with the actual data, the raw data.
What about it? Where is it now? You guys, the Obama for America basically holds on to it, right?
Right.
And so that's where it is. I have a quick question about that, though. And that is, what happens if this gets hacked? What happens if all of those data sets out there, those individual bits of information, gigantic storehouse of data, what happens when you can talk about that a little bit. What happens if somebody hacks that? What's the danger to the individual voter or the individual consumer? Paul, maybe you could start off with that.
Well, I would say it depends who does it. It's going to reveal a lot of personal information that's normally spread out into multiple databases. For example, I read that the first 18 months in the big data effort in the Obama campaign, they just put together data from many, many different databases. And they put all that together into one mega file that they use after that. So normally that data is spread out. You have some data in consumer database, you have some data in voter registration database, you have some data in fundraiser databases, you have some other data in demographic databases, you have data spread out all over the place. Now, what happens if one entity gets hold of all that data? It's, I think, left to the imagination of that hacker. I can't really tell what they will do with the data. If that data, I don't know, by mistake ends up in the hands of some company, they will use it probably for their own purposes. They will, you know, to sell their products. What can they do? Turn the company into a presidential candidate? I don't think so. Maybe sell some of the data to some other parties, but that would not be legal. So I don't know.
Quickly though, about a couple of different things. I mean, that's one of the issues that I think strikes a little bit of fear in a number of different people out there. Obviously, we touched on privacy a bit earlier, and that the knowledge of you as a one data set is a bit of an issue. What would you say to, and Paul, actually, maybe you both could maybe respond to this, but what would you say to somebody who comes to you and says, I really am concerned about all of this, you know, all this information about me that you're just capturing for this one purpose, because I don't know how much of it you have, I don't have any control over it, I'm really concerned about that. I maybe feel like I could be getting exploited or abused in some way, but I really don't know. What would you first, Paul, say to that?
Me too. But we will have to, I would say we have to get used to that, because I'm afraid that battle is kind of lost. Many online marketing companies, they already have a lot of information. They track people online, and the basic understanding of the privacy rights and how to protect your own privacy online is not sufficient. We are still looking for solutions. We have legal people, policy people looking for solutions in the legal domain, in the policy domain. We look for solutions in the technical domain. Can we improve the browser? Can we improve the network interface, the protocols, whatever we can improve? And we still don't have solutions. And I don't see, from my point of view, from what I know, I don't see any, let's say, clear solution anytime soon. So I'm afraid the privacy battle is lost, and if the average people would know how much information various entities have about them, they would be even more concerned than just reading about the Obama campaign and how much data they put together. There were stories about the father of a 13-year-old girl who with a Target. So it ends up that a retailer, a supermarket like Target can know some essential information about your own children that you don't know. So that has been going on for years now, and I don't see any solution.
You're not exactly inspiring comments.
You say you get used to it.
Yeah. Would you say get used to it, Ashley?
I would. And I think definitely because myself seeing both sides from politics and branding, it's one and the same. I feel like it's increasing how much information people know. I agree with everything you just said. I mean, again, if the average person honestly knew how much information is tracked from online to your shopping behaviors, I mean, everything I said before. And, it's just no difference, and I have no solution. I was always afraid when people would bring up the privacy, like, gosh, how do we talk through this one? But
Why, to go back to something you said earlier that connects that, why wouldn't you pass that mega file on? I mean, there's going to be candidates out there in 2016. This president stood for something, to run to elections. If there's a candidate out there that matches that message, again, the message that he's trying to put forward about the vision of the country and taking it into another 4 years, what would be wrong about sharing that and being open about it, saying we're going to share this we're going to share this database with you because we believe that you represent the thing that we've been building in this project for 10 years now. I mean, just to go back even before the dinosaurs in political history, but you know, there was a database of Democratic donors through the mail. It got handed down from campaign to campaign, and it was kind of just this piece of currency that the party banked on for many, many cycles. So why not? Why not share it?
I wish that I could speak to that level. But honestly, I don't know. That's one of the things. It may happen, it could happen. I think where I stop is the legacy document. And I think that's about where my knowledge goes.
Still an opportunity for some questions here in the audience. I see many hands.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, all of you. As someone interested in political communications, what specific regulations or borders did you confront that you had to deal with so that you wouldn't pass the privacy issues, that you wouldn't have to invade anyone's personal privacy?
I would say really that comes into play more with a lot of our custom tools. The biggest thing I can think of, and it's a good question in a sense of, because I think there's a fine line, right? Because there's certain ways you can do things where it's not as blatant. I'll give an example, and even from a communications or just language, but when we, obviously you know that there's geolocation stuff and we can know where you are from your IP address. But it's a very big difference between if you go to a site and a window pops up and says, you are here, here is your polling location, or here is, or actually would be your early vote location. But then to say, we think you are here, let us know if this is not where you are. But if this is where you are, this is your nearest early vote location. It's something just that simple to make it not feel as intrusive, because it makes the user feel, oh, well, you're guessing that I'm there, so you don't know for sure. But this is
But you
just
know for sure.
But I think,
You know, but we're not gonna tell you.
Yeah.
but I think in that sense, I mean, that's more so the fine line from how do you communicate it with folks. But it's really from a development standpoint when you come into the privacy. And so that's more of a, our techies and our developers, that's something that they came into play with a lot more than I did as a digital director on a local level. I mean, that's really something that from a development standpoint online is where you're going to find those restrictions and those privacy issues there.
Very good. Right up there, yes, and then we'll over here and then down here as well. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Portia. I had a quick question. You mentioned earlier that one thing the data told you was that Obama was not really getting anywhere with women as much as you thought they were. Were there any other things that you learned from the data that was like surprising or like was common amongst most of his supporters? Because I had gone to several events and it was very multicultural and different types of people, but obviously we all had something in common besides being American that brought us all to support Obama. So what was it that brought us all there together?
That's an interesting one, because I'm not sure if I can say one common thing across every Obama supporter. It's weird because I actually would reverse that and say I probably found more commonalities between the Romney and Obama people together than just to say there's a common theme for Obama supporters. Everybody feels this way and that's what draws them to the president. I'm not sure that I could give you that answer.
All right. Let's see. Oh, you have the microphone. Go ahead.
Microphone, so I have the power. Thanks, Larry. I have just an observation, which is this, that in the last election, it appears that both campaigns were able to manage big data so well that they were able to understand a great deal about a lot of individual people. Isn't it ironic that big data wasn't managed well enough for the average person to know a whole lot about the campaigns? I mean, right up to the last minute, nobody could agree on whether or not Obamacare would cost too much, or the stimulus package worked, or, I mean, and I could go on, but, I mean, those arguments were never settled, and it seems to me they were the easiest ones to settle with big data, or at least with proper analysis of the data that was available. Am I wrong? Paul?
Yeah.
That's not the answer I was.
Well, because, I mean, I think I'm with you on this, but it's not, well, it's small data. It's small data. It's two campaigns, they each are making claims. There's not a lot of different things to mine there. There's two big things to mine. And I think that, you know, we can go and tick off all the different things, but, you know, if the media were doing certain things and reporting things and making this stuff clearer than it might have been, if people were paying attention to when they did do that, if the campaigns weren't deliberately trying to confuse people and obscure what the other side was saying, or exaggerate it, or distort it.
But
So that's,
the
you know,
data is there, isn't it? Isn't it clear whether or not, you know, Obamacare is going to cost more than it should, or, I mean,
but the big question, look, you can make different predictions about how this stuff is all going to play out. So you know, you can make estimates, for example, let's just take one piece of the Health Care Act, the expansion of the Medicaid coverage. There's a big discussion about how much is that going to crowd out private insurance market. There's models out there for that. We can talk about that, but no one really knows for sure till we implement that. But the bigger question that can't be answered is whether this is a good idea. And so I don't, you know, that gets back to, I guess, where I started before, is that's what politics is about. So I'm not so sure that it's going to have the fix that you're looking for.
If I can also answer, I think there are some differences between having a full-fledged campaign, presidential campaign, where you have so many people, you know, who are hired to work on that, and promoting, you know, some legislation. Okay, maybe they had some of the data already available, but not all the data. That would be my guess. Mm-hmm. They didn't have as much data for promoting Obamacare as compared to promoting Obama as a president. So not all the data was available. Not everybody, not all the people that used that data to persuade voters were available at the time. And third, maybe when you talk about a specific issue and you have the opposite party, you know, kind of, you have this ongoing debate on one specific issue, and the other guy has the chance to kind of, you know, tell his or say or kind of communicate his or their opinion every time. It's maybe more difficult to persuade people as opposed to having these campaigns where everybody identifies their own set of persuadable voters, and then you go and try to change the minds of those voters. You know, I mean, if the models are correct, I don't think that the Republicans and the Democrats would identify the same set of persuadable voters. Okay? So when you are in a presidential campaign and you identify that set of voters, you only target the message to them, and they don't really get the opposite message that much. Okay? While when you have the Obamacare and it's out in the open and everybody can say whatever they think, people get both messages, and maybe that kind of contributes to the difficulty of, you know, persuading them about like one point of view versus the other. So that was, for example, an argument about the debates that we just mentioned here. Some people said, some parties said, you know, the debate when one candidate and the other candidate, they stay together and talk about the same things. It's like maybe the only moments in a campaign where you have both people, both candidates in the same place, and they talk about the same things. Because most of the time they talk to their own constituencies and they frame the debate in very different ways, and it's kind of difficult to even compare what they are saying to each other. So those pundits were saying even if the studies show that 60 million Americans watch the debates, but very few of them are actually swayed or change one way or another. The debates are still important because it's so few moments where you have both candidates in the same place and answering the same questions and talking about the same things.
I think to the extent that that things are knowable about whether or not Obamacare is a big tax increase, or we took money away from Medicare, Medicaid, and those sorts of things. To the extent that those things are knowable, there's something just a little bit more old-fashioned in big data that needed to work better, and that probably failed in a lot of areas, and that's journalism. And there needed to be more verification about those kinds of things. And so to me, that's a little bit of a different issue, but I think it is something that comes into play here that should probably have, hopefully we were able to depend on a little bit more than we did. That's unfortunate, but that's the way I think that was. I saw another couple of hands.
Can I just add one quick one?
Yes, okay, sure.
And that was sort of the, I'm going to agree with you, man. But this was the, I think I am. But this was the, that was one of the original hopes of how the internet was going to change politics. It was going to do exactly what you said. It was going to make the average citizen better able to learn about all these things and check all these things. So I guess we're still waiting for that.
I think it's, I got to debate it a little bit because I think it has to a degree. Now, has it to the extent that we need it to now? Maybe not, but it's a lot easier now to find out the real and true information in new media, in social media, in a lot of other places, verifiable, than it was in the past.
But if I start Googling things, I'm going to get death panels.
You'll get all kinds of things, but you'll have to be a lot more vigilant and have to work harder to get that information. But that information is out there. I saw a hand up. Let's get that question over there.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your thoughts. I had a quick question mainly for Ashley. So I see that you work with P&G, so that was pretty much a CPG company. So my question is that you talked about differences in branding in politics. So when you look at purely from a conversion point of view, for a company like P&G, it's going to be mostly ROI, conversions, very, very sales-oriented approach. How was it different for the Obama campaign, and what were the metrics purely from a quantitative point of view that you looked at?
Absolutely. So for the campaign, if you look at the campaign, we go through different phases. So obviously, the persuasion is a phase that really never ends. But targeting is what helps us kind of phase out our persuasion to allocate resources to the next phase. So then we move into voter registration. Well, that's a direct number that we're working towards, because we know, there's a few numbers that we can look at and say, okay, this is what we did in 2008. And there's key factors that let us know either we need to hit this directly, or we need to double it, or however we need to increase or decrease, which we never going to decrease. And then, so for voter registration, we knew exactly the number, the target that we were looking for voter registrations. For turnout, where we can break it down by county to know that we need this many people for this particular county. And so to me, those are the conversions that we can judge. Voter registration obviously being earlier and ending much early is, that's the first tide that we kind of hit. That's the first place where we go, okay, where are we? And then now it's okay, we registered all of these new voters, but now how do we make sure that all of these registrations that we've gotten, how do we turn them into actual voters? As some of you can think back to, but maybe your first time voting or things like that, or your first time registering, you might have even forgot that you even registered, right? So it's that chase that's going to get that ROI or turn out that voter. So those are the two numbers that we have. Another, I think, is a unique fact is that in 2008 we lost on election day, but we won early vote in Ohio. So that was a good insight for us to have, because we knew how important the early voting phase was going to be, because we had already seen that we turned out enough voters in the early voting phase that we could lose election day and win the presidency. And obviously, with population increasing and things like that, we knew that we needed to not only hit the number that we did in 2008 in early voting phase, but obviously increase that depending on those factors.
We'll take one last question up here, and then I want you to think about maybe what's the next step, what's the future? We'll try to end on those notes. So.
Hi, I'm the communications director for the College Dems in New York. And so a lot of our work was done through social media and the use of big data and reaching out to young voters. And I was just wondering if you think that methods like social media and big data can continue to be sustainable as far as increasing voter turnout. Do you think that we can increase voter turnout more than we did in both the 2008 election and the 2012 election? I don't know, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Sure. Social media was quite impactful for us in Ohio in ways that it needed to be fully integrated with things that we were doing offline. So as a standalone, which it should not be, it should be complementary to the things that are happening offline and traditional media with our communications teams and things like that. The social media certainly was impactful, and this almost is a segue, my response, into what I think is next. But the thing about the social digital space is that it continues to evolve. So I believe in 2008, it was more about, okay, what are the platforms that we use? Not necessarily how do we use those platforms. In 2012, I felt like the challenge was, okay, we have the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, but we were already on there, or not Instagram, but the bigger ones, we were already there. So my challenge was, well, how do I evolve this platform? How do I engage this new user in new and creative ways? How do we find new ways to integrate these things into what we're doing offline, maybe event activations, or whether it's live streaming events and things. So I really feel like it's going to continue to be impactful, but it's also dependent on where these platforms go within that time. Some could potentially not even be around, and some, the users change. The way people use Facebook could be totally different in 2016. Great question. I think it will be impactful, but we have to continue to change the way that we use them, and also continue from a data perspective, continue to understand the user and who is the user on these different platforms.
We've talked about getting the vote out and using social media, using using the data mining to do that. We haven't talked at all really much about getting the money out. How much of an impact did a little bit more wisdom about who these voters are, how much more impact did that have on the bottom line, on donations that were coming to the Obama campaign?
I think it was largely impactful, but I'm not sure if it was. I think it was more of a targeting from a timing perspective than necessarily the demographic targeting. I think it was certainly getting people at the right time in the right moments, and just as in TV, but using the right momentum from certain things. And then also from a tech perspective, one of the most innovative things that came out of our tech team was the quick donate button. That rose our fundraising up significantly. Oh yeah. As you can see, while I was on the campaign, I was used to being told you better not say a number. So I apologize because the numbers are not naturally coming out. So I do apologize, but you're right. It was 4 times. But that's another way of showing that from a digital or tech side, it was something that was able to impact the numbers coming in. But just to answer your question, I don't necessarily think it was a targeting of groups per se, but timing was key.
Let's talk about timing. Let's talk about the future. We're getting down to the end of our time here. So I did want to kind of begin to wrap things up a little bit. Where do you think this is going? Paul, we are getting better and better at being able to harvest data, being able to use it, being able to understand it. What are the next steps?
Okay, on the one hand, I would say we would see more and more of big data in the next presidential elections. From what I read, the big data, the data analytics team in 2012, the Obama team was 5 times larger than in 2008. So my guess is going to keep growing, and the importance of big data in elections is going to keep growing as well. And we will see more and more types of usages or impacts of big data. For example, in 2008, as far as I read, the model for persuadable voters, it just referred to the current status of the voter, like, are you an Obama supporter? That was #1 feature, and 2, are you a regular voter? In 2012, they added 2 more features, which are, if you are an Obama supporter but you don't typically vote, how can we persuade you to actually vote for Obama? And the other feature was, if you are a regular voter but not an Obama supporter, how can you persuade you so that you switch sides and you vote Obama? So they added a whole new dimension to the big data usage, okay, from just modeling the status of the voter to going to changing the behavior of the voter. So I would say in 2016 and then 2020, it's going to get even more sophisticated than that. So I anticipate more and more, usage of big data. So that is on one hand. On the other hand, I read about people who, are able to predict. One of them is Nate Silver it's a blogger from New York Times. And the other one is Dan Wagner, who is a DNC director. They were able to predict in 2008, and then midterm elections 2010, and then 2012 again. They predicted the final result of the election with like 100% accuracy and a very small margin of error. And they predicted that some of that is starting in June, which is months before the actual election. And some of that, let's say, maybe the main conclusion of that, at least in the sources that I read, is that if you use state polls and if you use some data that is known to be valuable, you notice a lot of stability in the voters. Okay, you cannot have that much impact on the voters. So using more big data on the one hand, and on the other hand, the conclusion is that big data shows that the voters, you cannot really change them that much. So it's going to be, in my view, it's going to be like a balance here. Okay, you have a mass of voters that you cannot really change, and on the other hand, you have more and more detailed big data about the voters that you can actually change. It's going to be like an interplay here. I don't know how this will turn out, but it will be interesting to watch.
What are your thoughts about what this will do, Grant, to the body politic, to the political conversation, to the traditional methods of politicking that we've known for years?
I think what we might see is a growing separation between the real campaign, which is increasingly now about the use of the big data and networking tools and reaching out and mobilizing people and doing all the things that the Obama campaign did, which is about, again, as you have spoken to so eloquently tonight, really getting people to turn out and getting your votes when you need them. A distinction and a separation between that and the appearance of the campaign. That is the daily stuff in the media, the hyper deconstruction of the debate performances, and all these other things that we normally would associate with mass media campaigns. So in some ways, these campaigns in getting ultra-modern are becoming very traditional. But I think it's going to create a paradox for the citizens and the voters, and that I think what's also clearly emerged tonight is they're going to have, though, to trust organizations and people that they really don't feel very comfortable trusting, and that's a candidate. Now, they're going to have to trust the candidates and the campaigns to be handling this stuff in a responsible way, and to be being rock solid about the importance and the centrality of the candidate and the message and the fundamental aspects of those things. Because again, I do think that there is a danger here, and so we'll end up If this stuff isn't transparent, we'll have to trust.
Ashley, I'll let you have the last word on this, but let's go into it by maybe responding a little bit about the need for campaigns to earn the trust of these people whose data you have in your hands.
Sure. Well, through the curveball. But no, I think that these are all very valid concerns and valid points. And I think you're right. I think that, you know, naturally, people are starting to really get it. You know, big data is the new theme. And so the average person is starting to figure out, well, what is this big data? And so I think you're absolutely right, where it is going to fall upon the candidate and the campaign to really work harder into, exactly as you said, earning the trust of the voters. And I'm not quite sure how that works, because coming from such a place where we had those constant one-to-one interactions, we were face-to-face with voters on a daily basis, making sure that you know that this is a real person. It's not just not getting robocalled, but these are people who are working tirelessly for this. So I do think it's going to be more of that in order to really build the trust of the voters. But I think that it's evolving in a sense for me that I think local politics are going to start adopting these presidential strategies and innovations. And that's where I really see the change, because I think that from a local perspective, where down to your city councilman or alderman, if you're in Chicago, they're now seeing this is working. And this is something that we need to apply way more time into understanding and using, because it's working. And so I think that it's going to evolve in a sense of we're going to see this from a much more local level. But then I also think that that's going to impact the voter. I think that local elections people are really starting to see that in order to truly impact change, it starts from the local level. And a lot of this is because the targeting is getting so good, things are really heating up. And then you start to realize that your local politics are starting to get even more contested and heated and things like that. So I think that it's a two-part of where it's going to evolve from a campaign perspective, from a local perspective. But I think that these things are going to change the voter and the voter behaviors, which is going to make it increasingly challenging to be able to use some of the historical data that we have, because I think the voting behaviors are going to change significantly because of the big data movement.
I think that's a good place to leave this. Please join me in thanking our panel tonight. And thank you for coming out for this discussion. I hope we were able to provide some nice insight for you. And let's keep these discussions going, because the only way that we're going to learn more about how this data is handled is if we share information among ourselves. Thank you very much.
This was right.